I'll reflect a few things that come up for me. I echo everybody's congratulations and just good feeling that there has been this leap, this flowering in you, and it's really beautiful. And it also, it can't help but trigger those same sorts of feelings in me, in us. So part of the witnessing process, is coming through self-reflective way. Early on, talking about letting go of fears, letting go of fears, anxiety. It occurred to me that, like, at a very deep level, the biggest fear in terms of showing up for what is, Ronit, you talked about showing up for what is, not having an agenda or directionality. And I've been there for periods of time before, and at the ground level, the biggest fear of what could show up is I might not exist in the next second. I might die. I might be disconnected from it all. And yeah, just that's the fear. At least that's what it feels like to me is, oh, okay. If I really let it all in, if I'm really present, I'm really not running from anything, hiding from anything, don't have an agenda or directionality. The fear is, this may be it.
So that's really unusual for somebody to be in touch with that on that level, Rafe. So I just want to presence that. If you remember the fear paper that I wrote,
You do.
It takes us through the different things that emerge, and as we actually go into each one and be with, then something else emerges, and then we be with that and something else emerges, and be with that, and at the end we get to, oh my God, I'm all alone. Oh my God, I'm going to die. Yeah. So that's the process. So you're at the end of that. Well, the end of it is I leap, right? So, but I want to, so yes, it's where you are. It's pretty far along. And actually that fear paper is a beautiful kind of assessment of where a person is, because each paragraph describes a certain kind of process or, existential space. And then people go, oh, I'm on page 2, paragraph 1. I mean, people can really see where they are along the path, which is kind of cool. I just wanted to reflect back on something you said and correct it, and that is we don't let go of fears, right? We surrender to them. So we don't let them go. They may let go of us, but we don't let them go, right? So remembering that is a really important part, that it's not about getting rid of fears. It's about immersing in them. And again, when we understand that this ecosystem, if we approach this ecosystem with reverence and with curiosity and with discovery, like we do any other ecosystem, like we do with the forest, or we do with the cosmos, or we do with a garden, or when we come in with inquiry and recognize the elements that are in the ecosystem and pay attention to how these elements interact and in the service of what, we can begin to see which elements promote what and which elements promote what. Yeah. So that we can actually be present to it. The ecosystem will correct when it is cognizant when it is present too. Just like the forest, they correct. If human beings didn't exist, the nature correct, even with human beings, but of course, nature has to react in a much different way to human nature. But nature corrects. It's just what it does. It's an evolutionary intelligence. It's a creative impulse that lives there, out there, and in here. And for us to honor that we are the same, and then let's examine human nature from that same exact space of, I need to understand this nature. I need to be with this nature. I need to allow and embrace this nature, all of it. Then nature will then do its correction. Yeah. So being with fear will reveal. And that revelation will create an organic correction. Yeah. And that correction may be, like, let's say I'm afraid of, we'll take something as simple as, I'm afraid of going in elevators. I'm afraid of heights. Yeah. Being fully present to that. Being fully present to its cost. Being fully present to the impact in your life.
Yeah.
Then the impulse or the correction will be, I'm going in the freaking elevator. Somebody help me.
Yeah.
It's going to be an impulse. It's not a doing.
Yeah.
Albeit it might appear like a doing from the outside, but it is a compulsion.
Yeah.
Just like when we get clear about our essence, our fragrance, our divine spark, when there's real ability to just have that be so clear that it becomes a part of the fabric of our cellular, emotional, psychological, spiritual being, where it just is a thread within. We have no choice. We will wake up in the morning and we will be our fragrance. And when there are issues or patterns from the past that interfere with that, we will plow through that. That force for life, that force to meet itself, to express itself, that river that wants to go to its source, no matter what, will create the Grand Canyon. There are no obstacles that can get in the way of. Once you have your essence and connected to it, that compulsion is part of nature. That's how the evolution over the last 4 billion years brought about this. That is quite a force. That's force within. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Also acknowledging experiencing this addiction to the feeling and the wonder of what shows up in a positive way, right? That's been a pattern of mine, where I can get present. I'll really focus on, okay, what's showing up magical in order to, and I guess there's a fear of losing that, right? So,
and what do we know? Where does that come from? What do we know about one of our aspects of our nature is what?
That we are that.
But this particular attribute is a seeking of pleasure.
Yes.
Yeah. It's a seeking of comfort and pleasure and an avoidance of pain.
Totally. It's it's an addiction. It feels like, yes.
Yeah. So knowing that that's one of the variables that we need to contend with, is one of the patterns that lives inside of us is that we will seek good feelings and we will avoid feelings that are unpleasant. We will seek pleasure and we will avoid pain.
Yeah.
That's a huge, huge aspect of what makes us human.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm starting to recognize that. and just acknowledge it without judgment.
So do you want to, is there something in your being, in your life right now that we can just kind of like bite into it a little bit more and sort of elucidate that for you a little bit better?
Sure. I think the thing that's coming up for me is like the macro to the micro of this. So I've over the years, the macro, like I've gone for long periods of time without the agenda and the macro, and been in more or less presence or blissful states. And then in the micro, when I'm day to day, even if I'm working on or doing things that really speak to my soul on the macro, get caught up in the micro, that addictive cycle of productivity, or am I on schedule, or people, what's the feeling there? Am I doing it wrong? Are people gonna think of me that I'm less than or not the best? Yeah. So those patterns, they show up in the micro. Even though I'm aware of the macro, and the pause, right, is the only thing that seems to work. Right, it's just pausing. So the pause to get out of that, and I guess looking for more ways to remind myself to pause on a moment to moment basis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've said so much, so I want to kind of like move it very slowly.
Okay.
The first thing I want to highlight though is this process where you're speaking, right, and then you go, wait a minute, what am I feeling now? That in itself is the pause.
Yeah.
Right? So, and that is not allowed in our society. We got to have it together. We got to flow with our conversation. We got to know where we're going. Right? That's what, so just understanding how the brainwashing and the conditioning of not allowing the pause, how pervasive that is. And not only not allowing it, but actually it's punitive if we attempt.
It's a showing of vulnerability.
Yeah, I'm not on top of it.
Right.
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. I don't have it together right now. I haven't figured it out.
Yeah.
I don't know if I could trust you when you have to pause in midstream now. Oh, my mind is going to go, what the hell's going on with him? Yeah.
And it's so crazy because I know from the other side of it, that there's nothing more powerful than somebody who is comfortable showing their vulnerability, pausing, right?
So we see it as vulnerability. I want to reframe this a little bit, at least for us, and of course, as we take it on to the world. We see it as vulnerability not to know. We see it as vulnerability not to have it together. Well, it's grandiosity to think that we know. And it's grandiosity to think that we have it all together. And we need to just flip that around.
Yeah.
Because enough with this delusion, right? Enough with this belief system that we actually know. How could we possibly know when we're not quiet enough to listen? What do we know? We know what the past. We know from the past. But from the present moment, there's new information and new data coming into play that if we don't pause and begin to kind of like feel our way through and go, wait a minute, like, what's that? Or, oh, when you said that, I felt a little thing inside of me. What is that thing that I felt? You know, what is that reminiscence? If we don't allow for the moment to be created from this moment, but rather be created from past reactivity and conditioning, we're never living the moment. And that is when we are vulnerable.
Yeah. Yeah, it's exactly the opposite. That's what I was expressing is the irony or cosmic joke.
Yeah.
Exactly the opposite.
Precisely. And what I loved about what happened with you, because this kind of, and of course it happened with Sebastian and it happens with us all the time. In the beginning, the permission, of course, we have to create a permission for us to not know, to not have it together, and to agree that we're actually in the presence of a new moment.
Yeah.
With new information.
Yeah. That's it. That's where I'm at. That's really big for me right now.
So that's, I want to pause you there because the other thing that I want to go to, which is so important, and I don't want this one to take away from that one, which again, watching the patterns, you know how it can happen. So we're going to anchor in, giving permission to pause in a moment.
Yes.
Recognizing that it's in the pause that I discover new information and I can respond from an authentic space.
Yes.
That is actually informed from now and not from reactivity from the past. So that's one. The second thing you said, which is even more powerful and I want to highlight. And so this one, I kind of need for you to open up because I'm going to reflect something that may be challenging. So the notion that in the macro, there is a sense of everything is unfolding exactly as it should, and trust and flow. Yes, just really kind of like being with the macro. And then it's in the micro that the addictions of, what are they going to think of me? Am I doing it right? Am I going to fail? Do I have time to do that? All that kind of the nitty gritty of, like the ego's conditioned reactivity, of course, that has been imprinted in us since childhood, shows up. So on the one hand, you have this kind of like spacious macro of I know that I'm in flow and I know and yes. And then on the court in everyday life, actually not present. There's a presence of it here, like coming with you, but it really is not informing you.
Yes. Yes, I'm acknowledging that. That's exactly right.
And the way it acts out in your life. So this is the mirror, okay?
Bring it.
So the way it acts out in your life, it's actually your ego is able to trick you over and over and over again. Because there is an awareness of this, the ego controls on the court while it deludes you into believing that, yeah, well, I know this. So, this is all good. This is all, and then allows you to distort reality right here, right now, and live in that distortion. If you didn't have this, you would have less distortion in a way.
I sense what you're saying. Yes, that is true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So bringing it down in the now.
Yes.
Being with what's so.
Yes.
And yes, pausing is the path, but the other is be careful, because in that pause, the ego will still come in and wreak its havoc. It will still be self-serving in some way and not give you the whole truth. So in the continuum of growth and development, the spiritual knowledge, let's say, the spiritual knowledge of, hey, you know, I'm a drop in the ocean of time. You know, the planet is 4.5 billion years old. I'm going to be here. I will show up with humility and with my divineness, and will do the best that I can with that. That spiritual, yes?
Yes, I know.
Begins to be given the space to actually, in this moment, how does this show up? So when you're asking for more ways to intercept, which I'm hearing, I'm going to suggest that there is no agreement yet. There is no conviction yet.
Mm.
So let's go back to being with what's so.
Yeah. So if there was agreement, if there was conviction, wouldn't need the intercepts, because it would be coming from within.
Well, it's not that you wouldn't need it. It's not that you wouldn't need it, because we are unconscious, so there might be. But it's the matter in which you asked for it. It was not in the service of it.
Mm.
So there was an intellectual like da 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 da.
Yeah.
When we're in the presence of what's so, and you can see the incongruence. So your heart is saying life is flow. Your spirit is saying life is flow. In your everyday life is got all these constrictions, what have you.
Yeah.
Really experiencing that.
Yeah.
I think you're still at that stage. Because
Yes.
you want to fix it. You're coming in to fix it.
Yeah.
You're not yet being with it. And when you are with it and it starts to, this, you know, like the real higher self feels the incongruence and the agony of the ego conditioned self. Now watch the creativity comes in. Watch the way it moves into your life, because it will. It'll move into your life. And then the request will come from another space.
Mm-hmm.
And your creativity and generativity around that will become unstoppable. Because when we're clear, there is a seeking. There is a life force that seeks to meet itself.
Yeah.
So for now, I would suggest feeling, experiencing fully. And where I would suggest is seeing how it plays in who I say myself to be and how I show up.
Yeah.
And just be. Again, nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong. This is all about just really appreciating the terrain that lives within and being with that. And loving every part. And life will seek itself. So, buddy?
Yeah.
So.
We were actually talking about this a little bit yesterday.
Yeah.
Obliquely. So it ties right into that whole thing we talked about, humility and that thing in front of you, but much deeper. So we'll revisit that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so coming back to, oops, not spilling tea on the
Yeah, I
carpet.
drank from the wrong direction. Yeah, that's right. Same color.
Coming back to just beholding and breathing in and receiving and allowing. Yeah, in the now.
Yeah.
See what emerges. See what shows up. Okay.
Hey, Rafe. Actually, this conversation brought up for me the connection between the macro. We start the connection to the macro faith of everything and the micro. And when you connect on the drop in the ocean of time and everything's going to work out perfectly, sort of mentality. I think I always have a hard time with that because
you just used the word mentality.
Right. Well, that's why I'm calling it mentality. So like Hitler was part of the big scheme, and everything worked out perfectly. And so he was an agent of the divine, and so were his victims, and so were the officers that served under him, and so are the people who responded to that at a global policy level to restructure Europe in the wake of the Third Reich.
And so are hurricanes.
And so are
and
hurricanes.
So are earthquakes.
Right.
And so are volcanoes.
And global warming, which is going to doom, a good chunk of humanity in the next 100 years.
Perhaps. We don't know.
We don't know. It looks like it. So are the scientists who say that. Anyway, point is, just because everything's working out as it should doesn't mean that I'm going to be okay. Because I don't know which drop I am. Right? So that's something that is like a big control threat for existential control threat for me. And I really got what you were saying about how operating in the moment in the context of everything is working out the way it's going to work out perfectly can leave you more room to maneuver egoically. But it can also, like I had this picture of a fish swimming sideways while the river's flowing that way. And that's the ego, well, I'm just going to do what I'm doing reactively because it's all going to work out. But what happens if you flow that way and you're, a Jew in Europe, right? It's there's nothing to do about that.
What is your question?
Well,
or do you have a question, or you just have an angst?
There's an angst there that fits into this whole how awareness of the big picture gives you more stuff to play with, and it gives me that stuff to play with. And then it's like, we'll let go of everything, where it comes back to is...
But you're operating from ego when you're saying that because...
Yeah. Well, because it's scary.
Because it's scary, and because it doesn't have an experience. Then when I'm quiet, something emerges that guides me. I am part of something bigger than myself.
Yeah.
So you don't have that experience, or you have had it in the past. Your mind is
trying to control it.
Well, trying to understand and figure out how this way of being, which the mind has no capacity to experience, because this is not a mind thing. That's why I went with the mental. So the mind is in the service of the spirit and the heart.
Yeah.
Then it gets guided by that. And then you're trying to understand something you can't connect with right now, and does not make sense to the mind that knows what it knows right now, because it's in the service of the ego system, the survival system. Ray, if you want to share.
Yeah, just just to acknowledge what I heard you saying is that it's very subtle, the difference between standing by while Rome is burning And there's a koan, Zen koan, about a guy being chased by a lion over a cliff and hanging by a branch and noticing a strawberry and noticing how, oh, how sweet, right? Like one is from a place of pure presence and the other is delusion and denial. And yet from the outside, those two things look identical. There's no way to tell from out here, what the difference is. The only way is from pure presence. Knowing what is right action, what is the right, that comes up.
I guess that's where I was going though, is that I don't know, like I can't know. Like
There's only
the whole conversation around what's right action and how to understand that is not a fruitful one,
right,
when it comes from the mind and
and the future.
So like really getting that puts the control outside of me in a way that is pretty scary, but also to some degree is a relief, because then I can just be my fragrance now and without being irresponsible about it. Like, so I'm just going to be my fragrance now, and whatever happens, who cares? It's beyond my control is sort of the give up.
Yeah.
But I can just be my fragrance now. I'll know what the opposite of that is if it's not control.
I want to relate this actually to something that, well, I've experienced. I know we all experienced it. Maybe you in coding, for instance, or like, have you ever been, just so present to what's needed to happen, what's needed to emerge in your code?
Yeah, all the time.
That you do something that intellectually you couldn't have figured out, and if somebody saw what you were doing, they'd be aghast, right? How could you do that? But from conviction, from being present, that that's what the situation required, right? And I've experienced this like in poker all the time, or whatever we are virtuosos in, we've experienced that. And so maybe there's a way to connect to that understanding and feeling as a way to.
Yeah, I like where you're going with that, because it's not a thinking. And what I frequently find myself all the time doing, when I said all the time, I actually projected you were going somewhere else, but the other thing is also true. But a lot of the time I will sit there not thinking, not doing when coding, because I know there's something that needs to emerge and I don't know which direction it is. Like there's like my compass is swinging. Like I could do this, I could do 100 things, but it's not going to the thing that needs to emerge. It
has to be free to go swing 360 degrees, because you don't know where it's going to come from.
Yeah. So, so you're saying relate that to every moment, basically.
The moment only the moment can inform, and the moment can only inform when we're quiet and listening to what wants to emerge.
Yeah.
So there's no control. I mean, Nazi Germany, that's what was so. Bonhoeffer listened. And what emerged for him, even though he was a man of the cloth, what emerged for him is Hitler needs to die. And even though that's completely against his religion or what what everybody in that religion said, he joined, the group of people who were going to assassinate Hitler. So he was listening, the church said, oh no, that's up to God. God decides what's going to happen with the Jews. It's not our responsibility.
Right.
God makes that decision. Bonhoeffer actually said, no, I am responsible at this moment. What I'm going to be able to impact or not is not relevant. What's relevant is when I am listening to what wants to emerge within this moment, and then I become part of that. And in that way, I am continuing life.
And how do you
It's not in the result. It's not in the outcome. It's in my being, in my fragrance, continuing life.
And how do you distinguish it from Lee Harvey Oswald?
You don't distinguish it.
It's not a
because Lee Harvey Oswald was called to the same conclusion.
Yeah, you don't distinguish it. You know it from deep within.
Yeah.
And and what I was suggesting is that you know what that feeling is like. You've done it in coding, for instance, and so perhaps just that can give one faith. Leone, that could give one faith that possibility exists, where the knowing will emerge. You don't have to think about it if you're present. It's a touchstone.
But without the striving, just
the striving. You're just right. Just the touchstone is hey, I know that's possible.
It's like the SETI project.
And again, it's an experience. So talking about it is just not going to conjure that up.
Yeah.
So it's really, it's in the quiet that you'll come to know it. You came to know it when you were in the hotel where I was sitting there. You were going home. Something paused you and said, go this way. And you came towards me.
Yeah.
You knew it. At that moment, you knew it. There was nothing rational about it. It was completely irrational for you to do that. But you chose at that moment to listen to something that wanted to emerge. And when you did, you changed your life. You changed our lives. Yeah. So it's that. It's the listening for something. And it's an experience. So we can't talk about it. You know, we can point to it, but it's never going to, yeah.
What happened to the word sensate?
Yeah, we can sensate. Exactly. Very good. I actually just
Netflix
wrote a whole thing on sensate, by the way. So it's very much part of that. Yeah. Exactly. It's a sensate. It's connecting to information that you mentally have no access to, but part of you knows is absolutely what's and needs to emerge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you,
Ray, for elucidating that. I think there's a lot of meat there.
Really helpful. Really, really helpful. Thank you, Rafe. And it was really useful to think about these states of flow and how they relate to that. When you're really, when you're not thinking about something, you're just in your gift, you're in your fragrance, and it's sort of channeling in a way. Because I think as long we can trip over the desire to be in that state, and then it's almost like, you know, you kind of, as soon as you acknowledge that you're chasing that, you're not in that.
It's like insomnia.
Yes. Very good. It's a really good example. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
He going.
Oh.
Trying to sleep.
Oh.
Rafe, that was, you, I think got my mind moving a lot just with this topic, because I think a couple things I took out of it. I guess first thing I wanted to connect it to is the pause that Roni was talking about earlier. I've been maybe not distinguishing, but recognizing a certain way I pause. And just like you said, when you're really present in what you do, yes, you're not thinking about it, but there is a common factor that's always happening. It's this natural movement, a natural, but it's a movement, it's a change, it's a being present, but present is change. So then I realized, at least one of the things that's been really working for me is last 6 months, I've been like actively running every single day, and running like 2 to 3 miles. So my husband kind of got me into it. I wasn't a runner at all, but going from, my mind is always chattering a lot, and I can actually have my own conversations with each other. And I think just like you and David, I have very strong, not personalities, but you're very smart guys. So imagine having your own debate with each other in your own mind. So in a sense, your ego is telling you, the bigger story, I'm so on, so forth. But when I go running, I noticed I'm exhausting my ego. I'm exhausting the chatter. And the second, and I'm also a fast runner. So the second I think, I can't breathe. So it literally, like, I'll see a really pretty bird for certain. I'm like, oh, I was meant to see that bird. And that bird, it was part of this whole thing. And I would never have been able to see this color, whatever it is. And I get into this space, but the second I start thinking about it and analyzing it, I can't breathe. Yeah. So I'm like, I'm going back to my ego. So that was almost, at least my recognition of when to just stop it completely. And some ideas, and I guess for Roni, it's in the middle of the night, but for me, it's in the middle of that run when I'm like, I can keep going. I can keep doing this. I don't have to stop. And then I find myself flying somehow, but all I have to do is control my breath.
Yeah.
That's it. I don't feel my body. I don't feel anything. I just feel like the need to like breathe. And then I had this image where it was almost like a power pump, like a seesaw. Yeah. Like all I had to focus is this, and everything else moved naturally. My legs weren't hurting. I could move really fast. I was going further than I thought. It was really natural. And I'm not a runner, but all of a sudden I'm doing this like superhero thing, which is like running 2 miles so quickly. But at least for me, that thing gave me the ability to really pause almost on a physical and mental level, because it's my chatter is very persuasive.
Yes.
So sometimes I don't know. Yeah.
That's so, thank you for sharing that. It reminded me that I also, when I run, that's when the chatter goes away. And yeah, that was a very, very beautiful. I've had those same exact experiences, and I want to share just a little vignette. This last weekend, I was at a family reunion. My wife's side, and my wife's uncle is amongst other things a poet, and he wrote a poem about the first woman to break a 4-minute mile. And it was such, I mean, and the poem came to him writing on a plane. And he delivered the whole thing. And then afterwards I asked him, so, I want to look her up. Like what, well, I haven't met her yet, but I will. Nobody's met her yet.
Beautiful.
That's amazing. I'm hoping it'll be me.
Okay, stop hoping. Just show up. Very important, just a piece of, physiology. So remember, the brain takes more energy to run than any other part of our body. So when we exert another part of our body, the brain has no energy. So we cannot think if you're running. It just can't. You got it. All the energy gets into the arms, the legs, the breath, the lungs, etc. And also just watching the language. So not controlling my breath, but focusing on my breath. Yeah. So the more attention I bring into my breath, the more it's going to expand. The capacity will expand. So whatever we bring attention to expands. Yeah. Beautiful. So what are you feeling right now? You just witnessed a group of individuals sharing their innermost thoughts and feelings with each other without any fear of judgment or criticism. Imagine if all of us in the world would be able to be ourselves, share ourselves authentically without fear of being judged or criticized. Imagine if you and your family, with your friends, your colleagues, were able to be fully yourself. We would really discover how amazing we are. I invite you to share this with anyone that you feel would benefit from this experience. Let us all be love together.